I'll get my revenge. Bron Breakker attacks and injures Paul Heyman and quits the Vision. I am absolutely disgusted. I am furious. And if you're not ready to rage alongside me after I break down what WWE just did to their most physically gifted young prospect in years, then you clearly haven't been paying attention to the systematic destruction of talent that's been happening in Stamford. Bron Breakker, a 27-year-old genetic freak who should be on an unstoppable trajectory to multiple world championships, a second-generation star with the pedigree, the look, the intensity, and the raw ability to be the next great monster in WWE history, just viciously attacked Paul Heyman, left the legendary manager injured and requiring immediate medical attention, and then quit the Vision in a backstage segment so poorly conceived, so recklessly executed, and so fundamentally broken in its logic that it exposes everything wrong with WWE's current creative process. But here's what's going to make you want to throw your remote through the television. This wasn't Bron's idea, this wasn't organic storytelling, this wasn't the natural evolution of a character arc. This was WWE in full panic mode because the Vision has been an unmitigated disaster, ratings continue to disappoint, and someone in creative decided the solution was to have their most promising young monster attack a 59-year-old non-wrestler and burn through weeks of storyline investment in one chaotic segment. And when I reveal what Bron Breakker actually said when presented with this garbage creative direction, how Paul Heyman fought against participating in this angle until he was essentially forced by higher UPS, and which veteran WWE producer nearly walked out over how this booking pattern continues to destroy young talent, you're going to realize that WWE is in complete creative freefall with nobody at the wheel who understands how to build the next generation. Let me meticulously break down this absolute train wreck so you can appreciate every layer of terrible decision-making. We're on SmackDown, though honestly the brand doesn't even matter anymore when creative incompetence is universal, and we get a backstage segment with the Vision assembled in their locker room. The faction is having what appears to be a strategy meeting, and Paul Heyman is there serving as some kind of special counsel or advisor to the group, which was already questionable because why does this supposedly dominant heel faction need a 59-year-old manager to teach them how to be effective bad guys? The segment opens with standard faction dynamics, someone's discussing their next targets, another member is boasting about recent success, typical wrestling stable conversation. But the camera keeps cutting to Bron Breakker standing in the corner, and his body language is broadcasting agitation. His jaw is clenched. His fists are balled. He's radiating barely contained fury. And then one of the Vision's leaders, let's say it's Drew McIntyre or whoever WWE has positioned as the spokesperson this week since their leadership structure seems to change every episode, makes a dismissive comment toward Bron. Something like, "Bron, you're the muscle here, the enforcer. Leave the strategic thinking to those of us with actual brains." Now pause right there. Let's examine how stupid this is on a fundamental character level. Bron Breakker is a 280-pound mass of muscle who moves like someone 50 pounds lighter, has the intensity of a caged predator, and looks like he could legitimately snap another human being in half. Why would anyone in their right mind casually disrespect him to his face? Why would you poke the bear when the bear is standing 3 feet away from you? This is the kind of lazy catalyst writing that WWE uses constantly. They need a reason for something to happen, so they have a character do something that makes no logical sense just to trigger the next plot point. But okay, setting aside the stupidity of disrespecting Bron, let's continue. Bron's face darkens. The tension in the room becomes palpable. Everyone senses something is about to explode. And then Bron does explode, but not at the person who just insulted him, which would make sense. No, Bron turns and absolutely destroys Paul Heyman. We're talking a full-scale assault. Bron grabs Heyman, lifts him up, and delivers what looks like a devastating powerslam or possibly his finishing spear, completely obliterating this 59-year-old non-wrestling figure who has no business being in physical confrontation angles at his age. Heyman crumples to the ground, clearly injured, possibly with a kayfabe neck injury or concussion based on how the announcers sell it later. The Vision members stand there in shock, though notably not doing anything to actually help Heyman, which raises questions about their competence as a faction, but that's a whole other issue. Medical personnel rush into the scene, and Bron grabs a microphone, his voice shaking with rage, and delivers his promo, "I'm done. I'm done with all of you. You think I'm just muscle? You think I'm just some enforcer you can order around? The Vision? You're nothing. You're weak. And everyone who disrespected me, everyone who thought they could control Bron Breakker, everyone who thought I was just another soldier in your pathetic army, I'll get my revenge. Every single one of you will pay for treating me like I'm beneath you." Then he storms out of the building, leaving chaos in his wake while officials desperately try to stabilize Paul Heyman. That's the segment. That's what WWE Creative developed, pitched, got approved through multiple levels of management, and actually aired on television. And I am seething. Here's my first question, and I need raw, unfiltered reactions. Does Bron Breakker attacking Paul Heyman and quitting the Vision make you more excited about his character, or does it make him look like an unhinged psychopath who just destroyed his own career? Drop your honest take in the comments right now. Let's start with the most glaring problem. Bron Breakker attacking Paul Heyman makes zero sense for his character or anyone's character in this scenario. Bron is supposed to be a dominant physical specimen who destroys opponents in the ring. His entire appeal is watching him annihilate other wrestlers through superior strength, speed, and intensity. That's what made him exciting in NXT. That's what should make him exciting on the main roster. He's a wrestling machine who wins matches decisively and builds an aura of invincibility. So why would Bron attack a 59-year-old manager instead of challenging whoever disrespected him to an actual match where he could destroy them in the ring and prove his superiority? If Bron is angry about being treated like just the muscle, the logical response is to challenge the person who said that to fight him one-on-one and then absolutely demolish them in a competitive setting. That would showcase what makes Bron special, his in-ring dominance and intensity. That would make him look like a badass who backs up his words with action. Instead, Bron attacks someone who cannot defend themselves, someone who's not a wrestler, someone who's a beloved industry figure. This doesn't make Bron look strong or dangerous, it makes him look like a coward who takes out his frustrations on an easy target. It makes him look like a bully who attacks people who can't fight back. That's not heel heat, that's go away heat. That's the kind of heat that makes audiences tune out rather than tune in to see what happens next. Character logic question: if Bron was legitimately angry about being disrespected by the Vision, name 3 better targets he should have attacked instead of Paul Heyman that would have made actual sense for his character. Now let's discuss what this does to Paul Heyman, because he's getting absolutely screwed by this booking. Heyman has spent decades carefully crafting his character as the brilliant strategist who stays out of physical danger by aligning himself with dangerous clients who protect him. When Heyman does take physical punishment, it's rare, it's meaningful, and it's usually from a top-tier star where even being destroyed by that person doesn't really damage Heyman's aura because of the caliber of who did it. Think about when Brock Lesnar would occasionally F5 Heyman. That worked because Brock is Brock, he's the beast incarnate, and getting destroyed by him doesn't make you look weak. Think about when Roman Reigns would manhandle Heyman during their partnership tensions. That worked because Roman is positioned as one of the top stars in the entire industry. The person attacking Heyman needs to be significant enough that Heyman being victimized actually means something. But Bron Breakker, while incredibly talented, is not at that level yet in terms of positioning and audience perception. He's still building his credibility on the main roster. He's still establishing who he is to the broader WWE audience. So having him attack Heyman doesn't elevate Bron to wow, he took out a Legends Advocate status. Instead, it diminishes Heyman to he got beaten up by a midcard guy who's still finding his footing status. Both men end up worse off than before the segment. And now Heyman is injured, which means he's being written off television for however long WWE decides this kayfabe injury lasts. So WWE just took one of their most valuable non-wrestling personalities, someone who can elevate literally anyone he's associated with through promo work alone, and removed him from TV because they needed a shocking moment for Bron's character. That's wasteful. That's stupid. Heyman should be on TV every single week adding value to whatever program he's in. Writing him off for a Bron Breakker angle that doesn't even make sense is creative malpractice. Paul Heyman utilization question: should Paul Heyman, at age 59, ever be used as a victim in physical attack angles, or should his character be completely protected from taking physical damage? What's smarter for his long-term value to WWE? Let's talk about the Vision and how this completely obliterates whatever microscopic amount of credibility they had left. The Vision has been, let's be completely honest, an unmitigated disaster as a faction from day one. They've had no clear identity beyond heel stable that WWE needed to fill roster space. They've had no consistent membership, people join and leave seemingly at random with no explanation. They've had no memorable feuds or significant accomplishments. They've been booked inconsistently, looking dominant one week and incompetent the next. They've been directionless, purposeless, and ultimately forgettable. And now Bron Breakker, who joined the Vision approximately 3 to 4 weeks ago, has already attacked their advisor and quit the group. Think about what this communicates about the Vision as an organization. They can't even retain a member for a single month before internal dysfunction leads to violent confrontations and departures. They're so poorly led, so disrespectful to their own members, and so incompetent at basic group cohesion that someone like Bron, who presumably wanted to be part of the faction when he joined, is driven to assault their council and storm out within weeks. This makes the Vision look like the most amateurish, dysfunctional faction in modern WWE history. Why would any talented wrestler want to join them after seeing this? Why would audiences take them seriously as a threat when they can't maintain basic organizational stability? The answer is nobody would and nobody should. The Vision is dead as a credible faction, and this Bron situation is the final nail in a coffin that was already mostly buried. And what was the point of having Bron join the Vision in the first place if he was going to leave less than a month later? That entire angle was a complete waste of time for everyone involved. It didn't develop Bron's character in any meaningful direction. It didn't add any credibility or star power to the Vision. It didn't create any memorable moments or storylines. It was just a purposeless detour that went nowhere and made everyone involved look worse. Faction booking question: what's the minimum amount of time a wrestler should stay in a faction before leaving for it to feel like it actually mattered? 3 weeks is clearly too short, so what's the right timeline? Now let me tell you what really happened backstage when this angle was developed, and this information is going to make you furious. According to multiple sources with direct knowledge of WWE creative meetings, Bron Breakker was not enthusiastic when this storyline was first pitched to him. Bron has been very vocal privately, within WWE's internal discussions, about wanting to be positioned as a dominant singles monster who wins matches cleanly and builds momentum through decisive victories. He specifically doesn't want to be caught up in faction drama, backstage attack segments, or convoluted storylines that don't showcase what he does best, wrestle. When creative presented Bron with the idea of attacking Paul Heyman and quitting the Vision, Bron reportedly raised several concerns. He questioned why his character would attack a non-wrestler instead of challenging a Vision member to a match. He expressed worry that it would make him look cowardly rather than dominant. He pointed out that joining and quitting the Vision within a month makes the entire storyline feel pointless and damages everyone involved. These are all legitimate concerns from someone who actually understands character development and long-term positioning. But Bron's concerns were dismissed by someone higher up in the creative hierarchy, possibly someone at the very top of WWE's decision-making structure. The reasoning given was that the Vision needed a moment to generate buzz and social media discussion, and Bron attacking Heyman would provide that moment. The fact that it didn't make sense for Bron's character, that it wasted Heyman's value, or that it exposed the Vision as dysfunctional was considered irrelevant compared to the short-term goal of creating a shocking segment for this week's show. Bron, being a company guy who wants to succeed in WWE and doesn't want to be labeled as difficult, ultimately agreed to do the segment even though he disagreed with the creative direction. This is the position WWE puts their talent in constantly: do what you're told even if you know it's bad for your character, or risk being labeled as someone who doesn't want to cooperate and getting buried as punishment. Paul Heyman also pushed back against this angle according to people close to the situation. Heyman initially refused to do the segment, arguing that it served no one's character and was just violence for the sake of violence with no logical story foundation. Heyman has always been protective of his character and strategic about when and how he takes physical punishment. But Heyman was essentially told that this was happening with or without his approval, and if he wanted to remain in good standing with management, he needed to participate. So Heyman, also being a professional who understands WWE politics, agreed to do it despite his objections. Here's the part that should make your blood boil: a veteran WWE producer, someone who's been with the company for decades and has seen these patterns play out countless times, reportedly got into a heated argument with members of the creative team over this booking. This producer pointed out that they keep making the same mistakes with young talent, rushing them into poorly conceived angles, failing to protect their characters, and then wondering why those wrestlers never reach their potential. This producer specifically cited Bron as someone who should be carefully protected and built, not thrown into faction drama and backstage attack segments that don't showcase his strengths. The producer's concerns were acknowledged and then completely ignored. The segment was filmed and aired as planned. And that producer is now reportedly considering whether they even want to continue working in an environment where decades of experience and knowledge about talent development is routinely dismissed in favor of short-sighted moment creation. Creative process question: when both the performer and a veteran producer raise legitimate concerns about a storyline, should those concerns be seriously considered, or should the original creative vision be executed regardless? Who should have final authority in these situations? Let's discuss what this means for Bron Breakker's future, because the implications are genuinely concerning. After this Heyman attack and Vision departure, where exactly does Bron go? He's now a wrestler who violently attacked a non-combatant, quit his faction, and is presumably on some kind of revenge path against, who exactly? The Vision members? WWE management? Random opponents? His motivation is unclear, his direction is undefined, and his character is now damaged. The best case scenario is that WWE uses this as a launching point for a Bron Goes Rogue character where he becomes an unstoppable monster who destroys everyone in his path regardless of face/heel alignment. He could be positioned as someone so dangerous and uncontrollable that he's a threat to the entire roster. That could work if WWE fully commits to it and books Bron to win every match decisively for months while building his aura of invincibility. But let's be real about WWE's track record: they won't commit to that booking. They'll have Bron lose matches to create drama or keep things unpredictable. They'll book him in 50-50 feuds where he wins one week and loses the next. They'll put him in competitive back-and-forth matches that don't establish him as special. And within 3 months, Bron will be just another guy on the roster instead of the can't-miss monster prospect he should be. The worst-case scenario is that the Heyman attack gets Bron in trouble either with fictional WWE authority figures who suspend/fine him, or with the audience who rejects him for attacking a beloved figure. Either outcome stalls his momentum and positions him as someone who made a mistake rather than someone who's ascending the card. And if that happens, this angle will have actively damaged Bron's career trajectory rather than helped it. Career trajectory question: 6 months from now, do you think Bron Breakker will be better positioned than he is today, or worse? Has this angle helped or hurt his prospects for becoming a main event star? Now let's examine the "I'll get my revenge" promo specifically, because the content and delivery of Bron's words reveal a lot about the character direction. Bron's promo was all about revenge for being disrespected, revenge for being treated like just muscle, revenge for being underestimated. This is a common wrestling character motivation, but it only works if the audience understands and sympathizes with the grievance. For a revenge storyline to be effective, we need to clearly see that the character was wronged. We need to witness the systematic disrespect or mistreatment that drives them to extreme action. We need to understand their perspective even if we don't agree with their methods. This creates emotional investment because the audience is following a character journey with clear cause and effect. But WWE hasn't done that foundational work with Bron and the Vision. We haven't seen weeks or months of the Vision treating Bron poorly. We haven't witnessed them taking credit for his victories or holding him back from opportunities. We haven't seen specific instances of disrespect that accumulated over time until Bron finally snapped. There's no history to justify the intensity of Bron's rage. So when Bron screams about revenge, the natural audience response isn't, yes, go get them. It's revenge for what exactly? The motivation is vague, which makes the character actions feel unmotivated and arbitrary. This is lazy writing that expects audiences to fill in the blanks themselves rather than doing the actual storytelling work to earn emotional moments. A properly built revenge storyline would have shown us 6 to 8 weeks of the Vision progressively treating Bron worse. First they credit his victories to their strategy. Then they blame him when things go wrong. Then they start excluding him from important decisions. Then they actively cost him a match or opportunity. Then when Bron finally explodes, we understand why and we're invested in seeing him get payback. But WWE skipped all those steps and went straight to the explosion without earning it. Story structure question: describe what the Vision should have done to Bron over the past 2 months to make his attack and departure feel completely justified and emotionally satisfying. What specific actions would have earned this moment? Let's talk about the presentation of the attack itself, because even the execution of the segment was problematic. When Bron attacked Heyman, it was sudden and violent, which is fine for establishing Bron's explosive temper. But the way it was filmed and the reactions from other people in the scene created issues. The Vision members just stood there watching while Bron destroyed Heyman. They didn't immediately jump in to stop him or protect their advisor. This makes them look weak and ineffective as a faction. If they truly valued Heyman's counsel and saw him as important to their group, they would have immediately intervened. Their passivity makes them look like they don't actually care about their own members, which further damages the Vision's credibility. The camera work during the attack was also questionable. If WWE wanted this to be a shocking, visceral moment, they needed to commit to showing the brutality of it. But if they wanted to protect Heyman and make sure the attack didn't look too violent, which they should given his age, they needed to shoot it more carefully. Instead, it was somewhere in the middle, violent enough to be uncomfortable but not impactful enough to feel like a major moment. The execution didn't match the intended tone, and the immediate aftermath was rushed. Medical personnel showed up, there was some chaos, and then we moved on to the next segment. There was no time for the weight of what happened to sink in, no time for the Vision to react meaningfully, no time for the audience to process the implications. It was just thing happened, now on to the next thing, which is WWE's constant problem with pacing. They're so focused on cramming content into every second of TV time that nothing gets room to breathe and develop proper emotional impact. Segment execution question: if you were producing this segment, what specific changes would you make to the filming, pacing, and character reactions to make it more effective and impactful? Now let's discuss what this reveals about WWE's current creative philosophy, because this one segment exemplifies multiple systemic problems. First, there's the obsession with shocking moments at the expense of logical storytelling. WWE has convinced themselves that creating surprising, talked about segments is more important than those segments making sense within established character frameworks or leading to satisfying long-term stories. This is backwards thinking. Shocking moments are great when they're the payoff to properly built stories. The Red Wedding in Game of Thrones was shocking, but it was also the culmination of seasons of character development and political maneuvering. It was earned. When shocking moments happen without that foundation, they're just random chaos that doesn't create lasting value. Second, there's the complete lack of patience. Bron joining and quitting the Vision within a month demonstrates WWE's inability to commit to slow-burn storytelling. Everything has to happen now because they're terrified that audiences will lose interest if stories don't move at breakneck pace. But this paranoia about pacing actually creates the opposite problem. Stories move so fast that nothing feels important because there's no time to invest in any particular direction before it changes. Third, there's the willingness to sacrifice character consistency for convenience. Bron's character as a dominant in-ring monster gets abandoned so he can be unhinged guy who attacks managers. Heyman's character as a protected non-wrestler gets thrown away so he can be a victim in a physical angle. The Vision's already tenuous identity gets further damaged. Everyone's character gets worse because WWE needed content for this week's show, and this was the easiest path. These aren't isolated problems, they're systemic issues that affect the majority of WWE's storytelling. And they're why WWE programming, despite having incredible talent and massive resources, so often feels unsatisfying and frustrating. The ingredients for greatness are all there, but the cooking process is so flawed that the final product rarely lives up to its potential. Systemic problems question: of the three issues I identified, shocking moments over logic, impatience, character inconsistency, which do you think is the biggest problem with modern WWE storytelling? Or is there a fourth issue I didn't mention that's even worse? Let me talk about the aftermath and what we should expect in the coming weeks, because I can already see how this is going to play out and it's depressing. Bron will probably be suspended by WWE management as punishment for attacking Heyman, which writes him off TV for 1 to 2 weeks. This accomplishes nothing except delaying his next appearance for no good story reason. It's just WWE doing their standard wrestler does bad thing, authority figure punishes them formula that's been tired for years. When Bron returns, he'll probably target the Vision members individually, picking them off one by one. This could be interesting if WWE books Bron to completely dominate these matches and look unstoppable. But more likely, they'll book competitive matches where Bron struggles and barely wins, or even loses some to build drama, which defeats the entire purpose of positioning him as a dangerous monster. Eventually, after a month or two of this directionless feuding, WWE will either A. have Bron reconcile with the Vision and rejoin them, making this entire arc pointless, or B. move Bron onto a completely different storyline with no resolution to the Vision situation, leaving it as another abandoned plot thread in WWE's graveyard of unfinished stories. Paul Heyman will return from his injury in 4 to 6 weeks and will probably be inserted into a completely different storyline with no reference to what Bron did to him. WWE will just pretend it never happened and hope everyone forgets about it. There will be no payoff, no confrontation between Heyman and Bron where Heyman gets any kind of satisfaction or revenge. It'll just be dropped because WWE's creative attention span is measured in weeks, not months. The Vision will limp along for a while longer before either being disbanded entirely or having another random member join to replace Bron, which will also go nowhere. The faction is essentially dead at this point. They have no credibility, no purpose, and no reason for existing. But WWE will probably keep them together anyway out of inertia rather than admitting the experiment failed and moving on. Prediction question: I just gave you my predictions for how this storyline plays out over the next 2 to 3 months. Do you think I'm right, or do you think WWE will surprise us with something better? Give me your prediction for where this goes. Here's what should happen if WWE actually wants to salvage this situation and turn it into something valuable. First, Bron should not be suspended or punished, that just delays his momentum. Instead, he should immediately start destroying people in matches, showing that attacking Heyman wasn't a mistake or loss of control but rather the first step in a calculated campaign of dominance. Second, WWE should book Bron in a series of squash matches against increasingly credible opponents, with each victory being more dominant than the last. No competitive matches, no struggles, just complete demolition that establishes Bron as an unstoppable force. After 6 to 8 weeks of this, Bron has rebuilt his aura and can be inserted into a meaningful title program. Third, the Vision should be disbanded. It's not working, it's never worked, and continuing to pretend it's a viable faction is just wasting everyone's time. Break them up, let the individual members pursue their own stories, and move on from this failed experiment. Fourth, when Paul Heyman returns, he should align with someone against Bron, setting up a proper feud where Heyman uses his strategic mind to try to bring down the monster who attacked him. This gives Heyman a meaningful role upon return and creates an actual story with stakes and emotional investment. That's how you turn this mess into something that could actually build Bron as a star. But WWE probably won't do any of it because it requires patience, commitment, and long-term thinking that they've repeatedly shown they're incapable of. Fantasy booking question: you're in charge of WWE Creative. You have to deal with the aftermath of this Bron/Heyman/Vision situation. Give me your plan for the next 3 months that would make Bron a bigger star and not waste anyone involved. Here's the absolute bottom line that I need you to understand: Bron Breakker attacking Paul Heyman and quitting the Vision is not the beginning of an exciting new character direction. It's the latest example of WWE's systematic failure to properly develop and protect young talent. Bron should be on a rocket ship to main event stardom. He has every tool necessary to be a top guy for the next decade. Instead, he's being thrown into poorly conceived angles that don't showcase his strengths and actively damage his credibility. This segment made Bron look like a coward who attacks non-wrestlers. It made Paul Heyman look weak and easy to victimize. It made the Vision look like the most dysfunctional organization in wrestling. It accomplished nothing positive for anyone involved. And worst of all, it was completely avoidable. Both Bron and Heyman raised concerns that were ignored, and a veteran producer warned that this pattern of booking destroys young talent. WWE is blessed with incredible performers and unlimited resources. They should be the best wrestling promotion on the planet by a wide margin. But they consistently sabotage themselves through creative decisions that prioritize short-term shock value over long-term character development. They keep making the same mistakes, ignoring the same warnings, and producing the same frustrating results. Bron Breakker deserves better than this. Paul Heyman deserves better than this. WWE's audience deserves better than this. And the wrestling business deserves better than watching supremely talented people get their potential squandered through incompetent storytelling. But that's exactly what we just witnessed, and unless something fundamentally changes in how WWE approaches creative, it's going to keep happening again and again and again. So yeah, Bron Breakker attacked and injured Paul Heyman, screamed about getting revenge, and quit the vision in a segment that makes no sense and helps nobody. That's your WWE in 2025, still making the same preventable mistakes, still wasting incredible talent, and still wondering why audiences are frustrated despite having the best roster in the world. And if you're not angry about this waste of potential, then you're not paying attention.